buenos días a todas las personas que nos acompañan el día de hoy y bienvenidos a la penúltima sesión de este encuentro académico Latinoamérica Norte enfocado en objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Mi nombre es Diana Balbuena, hago parte del equipo del Sdg en la región y estaré acompañándolos como anfitriona durante esta sesión. Hoy, en el último día de este encuentro, me gustaría agradecer a las cientos de personas que han aceptado la invitación y participaron de este espacio que el equipo del Sdg dispuso para compartir y conversar sobre un tema tan relevante como los ODS. Esperamos que las sesiones de este encuentro estén siendo muy provechosas para ustedes y que continuemos los esfuerzos como región para avanzar hacia el logro de las metas planteadas en la Agenda 2030. Antes de iniciar, permítanme recordar algunos mensajes importantes para el desarrollo de la sesión. El chat va a permanecer deshabilitado. Les pedimos que por favor envíen sus preguntas y comentarios específicas del tema en el apartado de Q y A que encuentran en el Zoom. La sesión está siendo grabada, la vamos a subir a nuestro canal de YouTube, el Sdg Latam, en la semana del 6 de septiembre. Se entregarán certificados de asistencia por cada una de las sesiones y les daremos las instrucciones para esto en el transcurso de la semana y al final de esta sesión. Esta sesión va a estar siendo emitida en inglés, por lo tanto, ustedes cuentan con una opción de interpretation en su Zoom en la parte inferior de sus pantallas. Para escuchar la traducción en español, por favor, seleccionen la opción español. Muy bien, estamos listos entonces para esta sesión que se titula Midiendo la sostenibilidad en la investigación a través de los ODS. En esta sesión vamos a estar hablando un poco sobre The Impact Rankings, que son las únicas tablas de desempeño global que evalúan a las universidades en función de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible de las Naciones Unidas. En esta sesión vamos a ver en qué consiste este ranking, cuál es su metodología, cómo el Sdg contribuye con datos y con métricas que soportan la evaluación de las universidades respecto a los ODS, y vamos a compartir algunas experiencias que hemos tenido asesorando instituciones académicas de todo el mundo en la definición de estrategias alrededor de los ODS. Nuestro ponente invitado es Mohamed El Aizati, vicepresidente de la División de Research Analytics y Data Services en el Sdg. Mohamed, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I was planning to say a couple of words in Spanish just for people to think that I'm going to do it in Spanish, but I'm going to do it. Un buen día para todos, and that's where my Spanish stops. So
that's great.
Thank you,
that was perfect, Mohamed. I will just tell the audience a little bit about you, and then we can start. Okay?
Okay, sure.
Perfecto. Quiero contarle a la audiencia un poco más sobre Mohamed. Él tiene una maestría en Ciencias de la Computación de la Universidad de Ámsterdam, en Holanda. Después de unirse al Sdg en 1998, Mohamed contribuyó a la realización de la primera plataforma de revistas digitales del Sdg, anterior a Science Direct. Y más tarde, en el 2004, contribuyó al lanzamiento de Scopus. Asumió en el 2010 el cargo de director de contenido y análisis y estuvo al frente de un equipo de tecnología y análisis que participaba en proyectos a gran escala para proporcionar conocimiento a instituciones de investigación, gobiernos y agencias de financiamiento. Mohamed es un experto en rankings universitarios. Él es el punto de contacto del Sdg con proveedores de rankings como Times Higher Education y QS. Mohamed tiene 2 patentes, se especializa en desarrollo de productos, Big Data, analítica y arquitectura orientada a servicios. En la actualidad, se desempeña como vicepresidente de nuestra división de Research Analytics y Data Services en el Sdg. Con esto, doy paso a nuestro ponente para que inicie su presentación. So, Mohamed, we're ready. The floor is yours.
Excelente, gracias. Thank you, everybody. And again, good morning. Thank you, Diana, for the nice words. I will ask you to send me that bio in Spanish because I only have the English version. Always
for sure.
Nice to hear the Spanish version. Let me start sharing the screen because we're going to share the slides. So give me a second and I'll check with you, Diana, to tell me whether they are visible. I will go into presentation mode. Can you see?
Not yet. I see a black screen. Now I see your presentation mode,
Okay.
but as a presenter,
Oh, so I need to flip.
right?
Okay. What about now?
Yep, we're ready, Mohammed. Perfect.
Excellent. Okay. So thank you again, Diana, for this opportunity. Always glad to to try to share as much information as possible with our research community. Thank you for the introduction. In fact, I can tell you that on Wednesday, I completed my 23 years at Elsevier. So I've been here quite some time. I've seen a lot of changes, I've seen a lot of evolutions, not only on our products, but also with the research community. I'm not sure who's attending, but some of you I may have met before because I always speak at these ranking events. For those who attended the Times Education World Academic Summit, which is concluding today, in fact. I was there yesterday where I presented together with Duncan Ross and Phil Beatty and Ellie Rothwell, both were on the master data, the so-called master class on data. Anyway, I just want to tell you that very familiar with Scopus, of course, the data going into this. I prepared some slides, many slides, to be honest, but try to give you as much information as possible. And I need to remind myself, by the way, to speak slowly to allow the translator to do a proper translation. But I would like you to be active and interactive and do ask questions throughout the presentation. I will make sure that we keep enough time for questions, because to me, it's much more important to hear your feedback, to understand to your needs and challenges, as opposed to make this a one-way direction where I am simply dumping a lot of information with the risk of potentially getting you confused or getting you lost in the level of details. So I'm trying to balance that as much as possible, but you can ask me literally anything. Okay, so what I prepared for today's presentation is the following. So I'm going to talk to you about how does Elsevier really position itself towards SDGs. In other words, how important SDGs are for Elsevier. I will then dive a little bit much more in how do we map our data to the Sustainable Development Goals. What is the methodology underlying methodology? How do we service that through Scopus, through Site? How do we use it to create bespoke analytics and provide data services to our clients? And what is the actual underlying methodology in details? That's probably going to take us most of the discussion today. Of course, I will also tell you about our contribution to the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, which, as you know, are based on SDGs. There, I'm not going to talk about all the data that THE gathers from you guys, from the institutions. I will obviously focus on our contribution there, which is the citation part. As I said, I will try to keep as much time as possible for Q&A, at least 15 to 20 minutes. If I manage to get even more, but that requires also for you guys to be interactive, not being shy. I'm sure the people in your region are not shy. So do ask any question, even if it's controversial or provocative, no problem at all. Okay, so Elsevier and SDGs. This is just again to warm up, and this slide just shows you how important SDGs are for Elsevier. Since 2 years or 2.5 years, we have a new CEO, Kumsal Bayazit, which is great because we finally have a female CEO, which is good for the inclusion and diversity, or SDG number 5 when it comes to gender equality. And she has been really behind all the focus and the intensity that we use within our thinking when it comes to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. For those who are familiar, we have a whole, what we call Sdg Resource Center. You can see the link there, sdgresources.relex.com. You can go there and you can see pretty much everything that Elsevier does. Let me remind you, we are, as Elsevier, part of RELEX. RELEX is our mother company. And you can see how many things we are trying to do this. To quote our RELEX CEO, Mr. Eric Engström, for those who know him, he literally said, what we do impacts the world. in terms of, being a publisher, being an information analytics. And our products and services shed light on some of the most pressing global issues. Now, as we know, the SDGs do try to address the challenges that the global community is facing. And therefore, the RELX Sdg Resource Center is put together trying to aid researchers and the public by giving them access to critical content that we really believe is important, which should potentially help them inform their understanding about the SDGs. To give you an example, since we are in the middle of COVID-19, as you can see, I'm dialing in from my home, and normally speaking, I would be in the office around this time. Elsevier, for example, made all its COVID-19 full text actually data available, publicly available for researchers in order to help advance the research towards vaccination, towards mitigation of all what we are seeing there. So this is just to say we are very engaged, and I'm talking to you here just because it's a kind of a hype these days to talk about SDGs. No, it really, really matters to Elsevier what we do. And in fact, the screenshot we see there with the 6 faces, and one of them at the bottom corner is our CEO. This is taken from an event that took place in Brazil, so not too far from you guys, where we try to basically help the community sharing our perspectives from very senior leadership perspective on what we do with SDGs and how we want to basically foster the collaboration and accelerate the research when it comes to challenges that that our societies are facing. SDGs is a good framework in that sense. And it's not probably the only framework, to be honest, but everybody has one global goal. I can tell you this is almost like an obsession for me, which is how can we measure the societal impact of research? I mean, we have the field-weighted citation impact of the citation-based analysis, which is good when it from an academic perspective. But the reality is, you do actually want to measure what does research do for, making people live longer, live healthier, create a greener world, address the climate change problems, or the inclusion and diversity. So that's what we really want to measure, and it's a tough thing. It's almost like a holy grail. Nobody has cracked it yet, but we try to do as much as possible from a data-driven approach, where we use data analytics, etc., to help the community at least find proxies towards that measurement. Okay, so let me just tell you again about where we are when it comes to mapping our data. So the mapping we have today is mostly focusing on research output in the form of journal publications, of conference papers, books, chapters. Pretty much Scopus, for those who are familiar with Scopus, and I hope and assume most of you are familiar with it, because it forms pretty much the foundation of most of the research evaluation activities we do. It's also the data source we use for Times Higher Education for the World University Rankings, which again been launched Wednesday night, or the impact-based rankings, and some more things. Scival obviously is built on Scopus. We have scopus.com that allows people to search and find and discover new research. I'm not going to go through the numbers. Most of you, again, Scopus is not from Elsevier. It does not only include Elsevier journals, it's across publishers. We have now more than 7,000 publishers producing or giving us total about 25,000. I think Elsevier itself accounts for 16 to 17% of that content. We have reached, I think by now, 84 million. This is a bit from July, I believe, so it's slightly out of date. And as I mentioned, we have pretty much every content type that we believe is relevant when it comes to research performance across multiple subject areas, across geographies, including our attempts to include as many as possible of your local journals, which are published in non-English languages. Recently, we've been adding preprints as well. And I just heard that we just added awarded grants on author profiles in Scopus. Again, this is not about Scopus or me making marketing for Scopus. Honestly, this is just to refresh your mind, because a lot of what I'm going to say is based on Scopus, and I just want to make sure that we have the prerequisites already there in your mind. So let me move on. Now, a lot of people ask, okay, I want to know all the papers that my institution or my country or my researchers have produced for SDGs. How can I do this? Now, if you have access to Scopus.com, it's pretty straightforward. We made the queries that identify the papers in Scopus, made them publicly available on Mendeley. I'll come back to that point in a minute. But this is just to simply say, you go to Scopus.com, you copy the query literally, you paste it, you hit return, and you will get all the papers globally that are mapped to that particular SDG. If you want to find only those for your institution, again, you add your institution ID and affiliation ID, whatever, and you'll find it. Again, we have our colleagues, of course, who can train you in case it's not entirely clear. And I apologize if I'm stating the obvious, by the way. If this is all known to you, then I apologize, and I'll ask you to bear with me as we go through the presentation. This is just to remind you where the links are. So the one in bold, the link in bold is the new dataset because we have evolved our methodology. The other link, which is the old Scopus SDG queries, are actually what the screenshot is showing, which are the ones that we developed early. Again, I'll come back to the whole evolution in a minute, explain the difference between the old and the new methodology, the implication on quality of that mapping, etc., etc. Again, I showed you Scopus and SciVal. They are already there as research areas for those who have access to SciVal. In fact, we have now not only the old methodology, but we have also the second methodology, and you can find it by seeing now between brackets 2020 and 2021, because the new methodology was only launched in April, coinciding with the impact ranking that was launched by Times Higher Education in April, where, by the way, I was also speaking there during the masterclass. Again, for the people who try to remember where they see this space. Okay, so the other piece that I want to make you aware of is that we do a lot of the things with the data that fuel Scopus and SciVal in case the needs that you have are not necessarily met by Scopus or SciVal, because you want to use a different metric, you want to slightly derail from the standard methodology, for example. So we produce a lot of these things. What you see here are just a couple of examples of reports that we used or that we actually launched this year. Most of them are this year. Well, some of them are a bit older, 2018, I see, but most of them actually are this year, which were based on this methodology of mapping Scopus publication outputs, or publication output in Scopus, I should better say, to the SDGs. For example, one of them is this report with UNESCO. In case you guys have seen it, this is actually done by my team, largely by my team. We have the power of data to advance the SDGs report. All these are clearly available. So I pasted the links there, and I think probably Diana will share the slides afterwards with you, so you can basically copy paste the links so that you can download the reports in case you want to learn more. Now, in the interest of time, I will move on a little bit faster now. Looking, I have the watch next to me, so I'm watching that. Let me talk to you about the mapping of Scopus publication to SDGs, or SDGs to Scopus publication, whatever you want to call it. I want particularly to also tell you about the evolution from the first methodology we launched back in October 2019 to the new method that we launched in April this year. So first, a word on the evolution. Now, most of you do know that the United Nations officially announced the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals on January 1st, 2016, although the first meeting to agree that they will be launched were already in 2015. So in 2015, we already went ahead and created something around sustainability science in terms of a report. So we launched a report which we call the Sustainability Science in Global Landscape. We used 6 main themes. It was not entirely clear at the time how many SDGs are there, 16, 17, 1, 5, 6. So we took 6 main themes, a bit global, I would say overarching themes, more generic themes. Then we engaged with some experts within SFA to improve them. At the time, things were clearer, so we went to 11 SDGs in 2018, I think late 2017, I started discussion myself with THE about what can we do with SDGs, which helped the development with the first launch of the first impact ranking, as most of you might know, was launched at KAIST in South Korea in April 2019. That was actually the last one on this type of impact ranking, if I'm not mistaken, that was actually in person, because COVID hit us obviously in March 2020. And since then, all these events have been virtual, in some cases hybrid, but mostly virtual. We launched then in October 2019, the first mapping of the SDGs in Saipan as research areas, as I mentioned to you. We do this, by the way, always for 16 SDGs, not for number 17, because number 17, as you know, is about collaborating to achieve the goals of the 16. But 17 itself is not actually a goal. It's not, it's just an enabler, if you like, to reach the 16. The 16 SDGs goals. There have been many partnerships with a number of universities. I'll come back to that, with Aurora, with some universities in New Zealand, Denmark, and the Netherlands here. And in April 21, we kind of relaunched the new methodology. And again, why did we do that? Because we wanted to improve the quality. Our shot in 2019 was our first shot at it. And we obviously did a lot of quality assurance, and we saw areas for improvement. And by improvement, I mean making sure that the precision and recall are as high as possible. And I'll explain in a minute what is precision and what is recall. It boils down to, if I say to your university, these are the papers that you produced in SDG 5, I want to make sure they are accurate. All these papers are accurately mapped. And I'll make sure that all papers that should be mapped, we did manage to map them. This is not a manual work. This is all data science, machine learning, and NLP-based mapping models. So it's software-based and it's data science-based, which means it will never be perfect. Perfection doesn't exist. This is not an exact science. So this is always what is the balance between comprehensiveness and between accuracy. And we'll come back to that point in a minute. Let me move on quickly. So if you go to Mendeley, to this link, you will be able to find the old methodology. Again, this is the old methodology, and you will be able to find all the queries in the PDF that you see listed there. And I just pasted one of the queries, which is SDG 1. That's what you see on the left side. So this is a typical Scopus query that searches these keywords in the title, abstract, and the keywords fields within the search engine behind Scopus. And you can see there are a lot of Boolean searches with the and or. And of course, we limited that in this case between 2018 and 2013 and 2017. Basically, the 5 years window we typically use, simply because this is an old query. But again, this is simply to show to you how this query look like and where you can find them. Again, this is the old method. I would not encourage you to go to the old method unless you are interested for some reason, because I think it's much more relevant to look at the new method. So now it's important for us to realize when I'm talking about precision and recall, what do we mean? So let me just spend maybe 1 minute to explain what is precision and what is recall for those who are not familiar with this concept. Precision means that if I say I have 100 papers belonging to this institution or to this person or to this author, group of authors, if I say all these papers are yours, if from 100, 99 are yours, then the precision is 99% because one of them is wrong. The recall is if I say I have here 100 papers that belong to you, but actually only 90 of them, sorry, and all 100 are correct, but I'm missing another 10, the recall would be 100 divided by 110 because I'm missing 10, which in this case, I think it would be in the 90 plus. So that's what precision and recall. And the funny thing is, if you improve your recall, meaning you want to make sure your model is accurate as possible, the recall, which is the comprehensiveness, will go down. You improve the recall, making sure you take every little paper that is potentially yours, will go up. The precision will go down because you might introduce errors in terms of accuracy. So when we launched the first iteration of this SDG mapping, and we were only able to measure the precision, to be honest. Why? Because it's easy. If I tell you this is yours and you can easily say me yes, yeah, no, it's all either yes or no. It's either accurate, correct, or it's wrong. Then, so we measured the precision, and in this case, you can see it was around 80%, which is the blue line, as you can see. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. It's this piece here. So it's 80%. Well, almost 80%. It's actually 79%. The industry standard is 80%. So we were just under the industry standard. And the recall, like how many we are missing, that's a good question, because we didn't know. And that's the difficulty for the recall. You are searching for something that you don't know what it is. You are looking for something that you don't know what it is. So how can you find it? Of course, unless you make some training data sets, etc., which will brings us into the machine learning model, which is not what we used in the first iteration. So the reason behind us thinking about improving, first, we thought we can do much better than the 80% on precision, but we also wanted to measure the recall, and we wanted to basically get here. We want to get in this corner here, right? Above 80% precision and above 80% recall. I put here the precision because we are, for four under sorry, in fact, we are all under the 80%, but we have no clue about the recall. I hope you follow up. If it's too technical, again, I'm happy to follow up with questions. So what we did, we updated the methodology. What we did, we used a team that is called Science Metrics. It's an acquisition that we acquired here in Elsevier in 2019, early 2019. It's my team, actually sits under my, well, it's one of the teams that I have. And they have already doing a lot of work to take actually the queries and try to improve them by making them even more exhaustive, so we do not miss potential papers. This is mostly obviously to address the recall point, right? How much we can add to from the papers missing. And because we know that we will never capture it by just keywords that human beings are aware of, we added a machine learning model, and we were able to find 10% more with the machine learning model. I'll explain a bit more about this. So the new methodology is called 2021 Sdg mapping. It's also available on Mendeley. Let me just go there. Oh, before I actually go there, let me just tell you, this is again very quickly to tell you how much effort went into this. So I deployed 7 bibliometricians in my team. We had 16 committees of 3 bibliometricians per committee. Obviously, some are overlapping, as you can see. We used more than 20,000 query phrases, on average, like 5 topics per SDG or 1,200 query phrases per SDG. It took us more than 4 months work, and we even developed a specific tool to help us actually evolve the methodology. So the tool, this is just a screenshot from that tool to give you an idea about what we exactly did. So we took the keywords, which have been gathered by input from our own subject matter experts, but also with partners like the university that I mentioned, the Aurora Consortium of Universities, the Free University of Amsterdam here in the Netherlands, the South Denmark University in Denmark, and Auckland University in New Zealand. We took these queries, we augmented them ourselves, so we added more, and we even added some journals, which we believe the whole journal is about SDG X, whether it's 1 or 5 or 6, whatever SDG. We searched the data, so we searched the database, and then we extracted the keywords of each from the papers we found, and we tried to see how many of these keywords we already had and how many of those are new. For example, if you look at smallholders farm, in our query, we had the word smallholders farm. What we found now is smallholders farmers. So you might say, oh, let me also add smallholder farmers to the query. I said you might, because if you have a good search engine, you can implement the lemmatization as it's called, which means that if you put smallholder farm star, you could potentially just find this as well. And this example does not give a real reflection of the extra keywords we found, because most of them are either completely green or almost green. The idea is that if you can find some keywords which are not green at all, which means that those were keywords that we missed before, which we now can add to the query and do yet another iteration, get the concept, put them here in this table, look at them again, and we keep doing this, recursively until we only find green terms there, which means that we exhausted the quest or the search to new keywords. I mean, again, I'm trying not to confuse you too much with technicalities, and I apologize if I do, but just to give you an idea about the methodology that went behind the scenes to expand on the number of keywords, because we want to make sure that we are not missing papers. Now, to give you an idea, if you look at the queries, look at the old method query, the 2019s, the queries were small, simple, and that's the beauty of them, if you ask me. I mean, everybody likes simplicity. They are very simple and very short. You can easily copy them and paste, and in the text area of advanced search in Scopus, for example. But the issue is that for the same SDG 1, we were only finding 10,387 for this period. But when we improved the queries, and the queries ended up being so long that if you would copy and paste them in a Word document, you end up with 100 pages. And I think I was using font 11. So if you would use font 12 or 13, probably this will be 150 pages plus. But the good thing about it is that we were able to almost quadruple the number of papers. So look at this, 10,000 to more than 54,000. And this is important because when we are making metrics available for Times Higher Education for the impact ranking, we want to make sure that all your papers are captured in there, because they might impact your ranking for that pillar of citation, of research, actually, I should say. So this is a little bit some of the outcome of that. I mentioned that we also deployed the machine learning model, and this gives you an idea about the benefit of doing that. So the orange bars tells you that the number of papers we were able to find per SDG. Clearly, clinical health and the health pieces obviously a large one because there is so much in it. And the blue part is what we were able to find on top of with the machine learning. As I mentioned, on average, we were able to find 10% more papers for SDGs. You can see that we find clearly a lot in health, quite a number in 7, and so that gives you an idea about that. So some of you might just say, okay, the queries are clear, they are available. What about machine learning model? If I want to mimic exactly that on Scopus, how I do that? We will come back to that. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I really want to move towards the THE methodology in order to make sure we keep time for questions. But I just want to say to you, after that work we have done, this is where we are now. I showed you the industry standards and basically the idea. So, and I told you that we wanted to come here. So we managed to come here, except maybe for SDG 1. We are not entirely there yet. But for the rest, we are there, and the average precision now is nearing 90%, and the average recall is also nearing 90%. Are we done? No, we will continue improving, but we believe this is a much better reflection of this mapping in order to reflect actually your research output activity related to SDGs. And again, this is just another idea. Here, I only picked some of the SDGs, and you can see for some of those, we are doing fantastic, 94 precision, 95% recall. We have this thing called F-score, which is taking the two basically, and so on an average, there is a method that basically calculates F-score. More important in my mind is really these numbers. The support here just tells you the number of papers that we use as a training data set to train the model, but also to actually evaluate the precision and recall. What do you use to say, yeah, we are missing this paper, or this paper is correct? Now, as mentioned, the new method is in SciVal. I'm not sure you can see it, so I apologize if it's too small. But if you look here, for example, at SDG 1, you can see 21 method, 21 method. The old ones are still there. Depends what you want to use. I would encourage you to use 21 because that's what Times Higher Education, for example, uses. But this is just to tell you they are also in SciVal as of April last year. I mentioned the new methodology does exist in Mendeley as well. This is the link to it. In there, we share the query, the complete list of very large queries. and also the machine learning model, the methodology behind it. So those who are familiar with data science can also take a look about the work that we have done on that machine learning model. Because ultimately, this methodology is a hybrid. We take search queries and we augment that with the machine learning on top of. To give you an idea, the impact of that, if you look at the number of institutions gaining from the new method, so look at this, pretty much every single institution have more papers now, because that's what the orange bars are, right? Almost all of them per SDGs. And you can see that if this is the line, 100 to 100, every single university has gained so much. This is obviously for SDG 1, but this is across all SDGs. All right, let me move on quickly. Well, I'm going to skip a little bit this. This is just to tell you, we are not doing this in isolation. We work a lot with institutions across the globe to help us. If you want to partner with us, you have feedback, input, by all means, we encourage that, because ultimately, SDGs are important for us, but we also want to make sure that we do something that has impact. As mentioned, there is something on SDG on the RELX Resource Center. If you go to the RELX Resource Center, you will be able to give us feedback on papers that we assign to SDGs. If you think, no, this is wrong, etc., feel free. Again, I know it's manual, so you have to do this on one by one. But we have something in there that would allow you to do this feedback. This is a bit forward-looking, so I'm not going to again go through each one of them. We do a lot of experimentation already with some artificial intelligence to find even more or better ways to do this mapping. As I mentioned, we continue to improve the query with the partners that we have. As publisher, we want to ask authors during the manuscript subscription to our journals, for example, to say, is this paper related to any SDGs? And if yes, would you select which one or which ones that is? And we also encourage local definition of these rankings. I know, for example, that we received recently some input from Chile because they have slightly different view on how they look at this SDGs and how this research should be backed. We also encourage that. So if you have any input in there, by all means, please do. Let's go now to the THE ranking, and I need to accelerate a little bit because I really want to keep at least 15 minutes for discussion and Q&A. You know that the methodology is obviously available on the Times Higher Education website, so you can find a lot of information in there. There are 17 rankings obviously per SDG. Sorry, actually 17. One is overall ranking, and the other one is for each of the 16 SDGs. You know that for the overall ranking, you need to participate in number 17, which is about the collaboration, and THE would select the top 3 where your institution performs best to include it in the overall ranking. If you do not have enough, for example, 70, you only applied for 17 and 2 more SDGs, you will not figure in the overall ranking, and you will only be visible in the specific rankings. There are a lot of metrics, and I'll show you each one of them. Overall, we contribute for 27% of the entire 100% weighting. So let me show you this. This is actually, again, it's very small, and I apologize, but these on the left side are all, just trying to see whether you can see the cursor. All these metrics are all the metrics that Times Higher Education is using. We only contribute the research part. Basically, you can see for each of the SDGs, which metrics are used. And this is across all SDGs. But each time we only contribute to the research. So let me zoom into that research. Before doing so, and I apologize, maybe the order of the slide should have been better. But I want just to say that, for example, for this time around, we typically use the 15 to 2019 window. We are not including 20 yet because by April 21, the publication year 2020 is not coming to completion yet. So we have to use 2019 as the most recent publication year in that window. Journals that we suspend in Scopus, again, a completely different topic because, as you know, sometimes we do suspend journals in Scopus if we see some odd behavior. we exclude them from the data set. These are the document types that we use, just like for the World University Ranking: articles, reviews, conference papers, books and books chapters. And for this time around, we use this new methodology I was talking about. These are the metrics we provide. So let me just go straight to which one we provide. So for example, for number one, we provide the field-weighted citation impact, the output, number of papers basically, and we provide the output, with low income. So basically, the number of papers that you have co-authored with institutions of the global south, countries that we see as low income. Another example, let me take number 5, gender equality. It's not the number of papers, again, the output, it's the number of papers that sit in the top 10. It is the top 10 journals based on site score, the journal metric. And we also take the proportion of female in the papers produced by that institution. For example, we also use patent citations for number 9. Again, I think, and I assume this is not shocking, you should be aware of this. If not, we're more than happy to share this. But this just gives you an idea about which metrics from Elsevier we use to contribute with the 27% that is related to research in the overall impact-based rankings. Let me move on quickly. So this is probably my last slide, and I'll stop. Ultimately, again, as I mentioned, when they take, this is for the overall score, right? Which is the most important, so the overall score for the overall ranking, not for specific SDG. They take basically, again, as I mentioned, SDG 17 is a mandatory SDG to participate, so you have to participate there. And then basically each of the other top 3 SDGs account for 26%. Remember, SDG 17, I'm going back, SDG 17 is there. So we will provide metrics for it, which is the number of papers which are co-authored for the Partnership for the Goals. And again, the partnerships. So this is the number of institutions for the number of papers per institution, apologies. And this is the number of co-authored papers with low-income countries, because this is, again, the thinking there is that it drives collaboration to achieve the goals, which is exactly number 17, what SDG number 17 is really about. Again, as I mentioned, THE will look at your top 3 SDGs, and they will combine them with number 17. And what you see here on this table is the weighting assigned by Times Higher Education for each of these components. Really, the last thing I would like to say is that we are contributing, so we don't own the rankings. Our position is that we are not the owners. We contribute, we advise, we recommend things to Times Higher. We look at, we do a lot of quality assurance to see whether there are outliers, whether there are things that do not seem to make sense, etc. But many of the cases, obviously, the decisions are made by Times Higher Education. With that, I would like to start back. Diana, I hope we have enough time for questions, and I hope that we do have some questions.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Yes, we have a couple of questions from the audience. But first, I would like to ask you one myself, because we actually had this week the World Academic Summit. So perhaps there could be some confusion about the rankings and the different rankings, and perhaps an institution is asking if they can participate in both of these rankings, or just in one of those. So can you clarify this part a little bit, please?
Sure. Yeah. So again, from yesterday to today, the so-called World Academic Summit, which is hosted by the University of Toronto. So normally speaking, it would be in Canada, but this is all virtual. Is about the World University Ranking. Again, the methodology is completely different. It's not about SDGs. It's really about your research, reputation, teaching, etc. Technically speaking, can you participate in both? Of course, there are many universities who participate in both. Now, if you ask me on a personal title, what do I see? I see that a lot of universities who cannot participate in the World University Ranking do participate in the impact ranking. The reason is there are many criteria to participate in the World University Ranking. For example, you have to produce 1,000 papers in the last 5 years. So if the number of papers that you have produced in these 5 document types, again, the article, review, etc., if you don't have 1,000 number of papers, you cannot be listed in the World University Ranking. Such a limit or such a threshold for the impact ranking does not exist. So you could have just a few papers about SDG 1 or SDG 3, and yet you can participate. What we see is that many universities who participate in the World University Ranking, especially from the US, for example, are not participating in the impact ranking, which is interesting. Why? I mean, I do think that they are keen to help address the challenges of the SDGs, of course, right? And nobody, I mean, I don't think anybody on the world wants to close their eyes for the climate change problems or the gender equality or the poverty or the hunger. But it might be because they are so well ranked in the World University Ranking that they want to risk, joining a new impact ranking and therefore potentially be bottom. I also understand that the process of collecting the data for the impact ranking, so the number of data that you have to provide from your institution is quite laborious, it's quite exhaustive. You have to prepare a lot of material. For the World University Ranking is relatively simpler. Reputation is done on your behalf. Research output obviously is done on your behalf. The only thing that you have to provide for them there is the number of staff, the ratio of international students versus local students, the ratio of international staff versus local staff, basic stuff. So to answer your question, simplified answer, can you participate in both? Yes, of course you can. What do we see? We see much more from the Global South participating in impact ranking or Global South and emerging economies than from the North. Again, as I gave you some ideas which I believe could be the reasons behind it. Now, if you ask me, I think that the future of this ranking is probably the impact rankings. So I think there is much more potential with the impact rankings than with the World University Ranking. I'm saying this on a personal title, so this is again based on what I see in terms of engagement, because the impact ranking have much more a link to societal impact than the World University Ranking, which is much more about prestige, about reputation, about how to attract students.
Okay, understood. We have a question from Graciela. She was wondering why SAIBAL doesn't consider SDG 17.
Yeah, so as I was saying, SDG 17, I tried to explain this. If you look at the definition of SDG 1 through 17, number 1 through 16, it addresses a specific goal, right? It's a specific goal. It says what that challenge is and what is the objective is, what is the goal. Again, address hunger, address poverty, blah, blah. Number 17 is not about a goal. It's much more an enabler. It doesn't talk about poverty. It doesn't talk about climate change. It doesn't talk about gender equality or anything else. It simply says it's the goal there, if you like, is stimulate collaboration in order to achieve one of the 16 goals. So from an article mapping, it's impossible for us to map something about let's work together in order to address that particular SDG. That's why it's not a goal on its own, it's an enabler. Even if you look at what I just showed here, look at the metrics we are using, right? If you look at the metrics we are using, I don't know whether you can see this, but we are using just the number of output, the number of articles, and the number of co-authorship with the Global South, with low-income countries, generally speaking. So SDG 17 is not an objective on its own, and therefore it's not a research area, and that's why you don't see it inside that.
Okay, Mohamed, thank you. We have a last questions. Switching to Spanish, invitamos a nuestra audiencia si tienen algún comentario o alguna pregunta que la compartan en la cajita de QIA. Switching to English again. Andrea is asking how to see the menu seeker in Elsevier by each SDG. I think she's referring to the slide where you show in Saival to the left, the different SDG queries.
Yeah, so what is the question there?
She wants to know how do you get there to that menu?
Oh, as I explained, I mean, obviously, Dana, feel free to follow up with this particular person, but the easy answer is very simple. You go to Saival, you go to the research area, and you get this box where you can search about the research area that are pre-existing, so those that we created ourselves. You type SDG and you will get them all. It's very simple, straightforward. Oh, there you go. Thanks, Karen. There is a link in the chat how you get there easily, or maybe an explanation on how to get there. It's actually very straightforward.
Okay, Graciela says thank you so much. She got it. So Mohammed, I can see any more questions here, but by then, how do you think the Latin American institutions can partner with Elsevier to advance towards the SDG? Because in previous chats with you, I've talked with you how can we help institutions to find a way. Perhaps you can share some experience about anything that we're doing with other institutions, that would be great.
So there are multiple ways to kind of collaborate, if you like. Well, I'm gonna take the question slightly broader, Dan, if you don't mind. So I'll talk about the collaboration, but also say what we can do for the institutions. So how can we potentially help institutions make their way? For example, on the collaboration, as I mentioned, we already have some partners. If there are institutions who think they have a better way to map their output to particular SDGs, I know that in many countries, by the way, in the world, have now what they call sustainability departments. So like the research, the technology transfer office or the research office, they have a sustainability department within institutions themselves. And those departments come up with a bunch of policies within the institution that educate researchers that when they publish something, they have to think about the SDGs, if there is any link to SDGs, for example. This is not to fake or to force SDGs per se for research, for research activities, but it's about creating a mindset for researchers to make sure that they can link their outputs or their research to the SDGs. Again, if they have methodologies or they have some data that they think could help us improve the methodology I was explaining in details, so that we do justice to this research to SDGs within Latin America or within your region, by all means, please reach out to us, either through you, Diana, and your team, or someone. We will be more than happy to engage. As I mentioned to you, the example of Chile. So there is a University of Chile, I don't remember the name, who said, well, we already have some data that we have mapped ourselves to SDGs. We are not sure whether it's the same thing as yours. Can we look and see whether there is an overlap, or we can improve on both sides? We are happy to do that. The other piece in terms of how we can help institutions position themselves within the SDGs, like the impact rankings or other. As I mentioned, obviously we have tools like Saival and Scopus where people can do a lot of research themselves. But my team has also this kind of, I wouldn't call them consultancy, but advisory type of role where we can create some bespoke data, bespoke analysis, bespoke reports, etc., to help institutions understand their strength about which SDGs, with whom they should partner with, to what are the opportunities basically, what are the areas to improve, where should you play, where you should not play. We can tell them even more about the methodology. So I shared with you some higher level thinking, but there is a lot of details behind the curtains when it comes to this work. So all in all, what I'm trying to say, we can collaborate to improve the methodology, open to that. And we can also help institutions, again, through our tools and services, to position them better in order for them to basically get the visibility and get the reward to make a case both nationally and internationally. Many countries, by the way, I'm not sure about Colombia and other countries, but in many countries, the funding agencies now are paying attention to SDGs, and they want you, basically, they want to reward you with funding based on the contribution to SDGs, including in the US with, you know, NSF, for example, or some other big funders.
Great. You just answered a question that we have here that says, do you know if any founder institution is using SDGs for money allocation? You just mentioned that, right? Many funding
They do, yes.
organizations and bodies are using this.
Yeah. They do, and I can tell you, this is just early days even. So we will see this happening even more often. I mean, even think about, I'll give you an example if you don't mind. In China, for example, it used to be just about publish or perish, right? In other words, you have to publish as a researcher in the top journals based on impact factor. When you submit for a grant, they look at your CV and they look at how many papers you have in the top impact factor journals. If you have, you likely get the money. If you do not publish in these very international prestigious journals, you might not get the money. Even in China, they changed now this methodology. They are working away from this, you know, journal impact factor based metric, etc. And they are looking much more to what does your research do to the community? Are you again creating jobs? Are you addressing some, you know, health issues? And the same thing happens with Australian Research Council, etc. The trend that is going to become even bigger as we progress.
Right. And the last question, Mohammed, do you know if any country is using SDGs in research national assessments?
It's a good question. I think, to my knowledge, not formally yet. So yeah, it's not, I mean, if the question is about, is there, for example, a national assessment initiative that takes the number of papers in an SDG? The answer, just to be frank, I don't think so yet. Because again, there is this discussion, are SDGs the right proxy or is this something else? In the UK, you know, with the Research Excellence Framework, they have this thing called case studies. So they ask you, for example, to fill in a form about what impact this research has. It's just a document that you have to fill in. For example, I've seen this a couple of examples. Some people said, we went to Botswana in Africa, we've done this research, and the elephant population now has grown. This stuff in Australia, they have something called impact and engagement, which is pretty much the same. So the frank answer, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, SDGs as a framework has not become a formal framework, if you like, embedded in the national assessment. But I'm sure people will be looking at it because this is, the whole SDGs is new. And remember, this was just launched in 2015. So we're talking about 6 years now, and I expect this thing to grow.
Great. Well, Mohammed, thank you so much. We're really glad that you can be with us today. I think we can finish the session, and for sure we're gonna keep contacting you to talk more about this.
No problema. It was a pleasure, as always. Happy to follow up on anything. I put my email address, but happy to follow up with anything we can do to the region. I think there's a lot of potential in the region anyways, and I think looking at the impact results, for example, growing. So it was a pleasure. Thank you very much, and I wish you a good weekend.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. See you soon. Bueno, pues muchas gracias. Creo que hemos concluido nuestra sesión de preguntas y respuestas para la audiencia, agradeciendo a todos los participantes quienes compartieron sus preguntas y comentarios.